Okay. I once had a meeting where I was supposed to show a technique to my fellow program managers. I was the program manager lead and had five other people on the call. And I'm ready to present. And then I learned, and all the program managers are in Prague, and I'm in the US. And about 2 hours before the meeting, we learned that Russia invaded Ukraine. And given the proximity of Prague to Ukraine, I decided that was not appropriate to just go ahead and do business as usual. So we talked about how they felt because there was everybody would have been polite and we could have gone on with my presentation, but I checked in with them and I'm glad I did because everybody was nervous. So we talked about that. We talked about how do you feel about your work today and what are you worried about, and do you have family? And I'm like, none of you have to talk about it, but here's what I'm learning, right? And they go, yeah, you should know about this. You should. So we wound up having a really almost a team building session that broke the fourth wall because we're all professional. We always talked about the projects and risks and roadmaps and cut lines. And this one was really about like taking a breath, like, okay, we get to talk about something that's all on our minds. So let's just go there. And I'm sure right now
So
it's
let me ask you this.
yeah.
So you were at eBay for the
eBay.
last 12
13
years
years.
or something, right?
Yep.
And you called a lot of meetings, and you must have been in a lot of meetings because you were a program manager, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Is it normal for meetings to be a waste of everybody's time?
No, it is meetings, at least for me, and I'm gonna intuit that other people on the meeting, even if they say nothing, I've been in so many meetings where someone doesn't even have their camera on, they say nothing the whole meeting, and someone will say something with 1 minute to go that's kind of incidental, like, oh, by the way, I'm gonna merge this PR today, and I hope it's okay. And then someone will unmute and open their camera, and go, wait, you don't do that yet. And that 30 seconds made that meeting important, right? Even if everybody said, well, this is a waste of time. We already knew what we were going to do. Or we already know this stuff, or why we meet. That never happens anyway. But at any time, someone could get important information that even if it's incidental, and we talk about mention in passing, right? You MIP it, MIP. You just say, oh, by the way, X. Anytime anyone has said, oh, by the way, it's usually not by the way. It's usually in the way, and it's really important to hear about. So I
Especially when
tend to,
that devious detective Columbo holds a meeting.
uh,
He always is like the
one,
last thing he says,
more,
oh,
one
one
last
more
thing,
question.
one more question.
And then you get arrested right after is what
Is
happens.
this your bloody knife?
I
Oh,
find it astonishing that it is so common online to see engineers and people on software projects complaining about meetings as if they're useless. For one thing, I go, well, do you think everybody's stupid for having meetings? Do you think they're just paid a lot of money and they have to think of something to do, so they call meetings? Is that what you think's happening? I've never seen that. I've never seen it. And I've been in the business for 41 years. And I don't know where these allegedly completely useless meetings are happening. They never happen around me. And then I think, oh, maybe they're not happening around me because I just don't put up with it. If I were
sure.
to go to a useless meeting, I feel very easy about saying I don't need to be here. So I'm gonna go. See you later.
Well, here's another
I have
complaint.
important things to do, and being here doesn't help. However, I think there's this belief that is a completely untested, unjustified belief, but it's a folk truism that most meetings are about making decisions. And
Rarely.
that's called a decision meeting, and they
Yeah.
certainly exist. But I don't think that most meetings are about making decisions on complex projects. I think most meetings are about managing our relationships with each other and managing our sense of the shared status and shared challenges of the project. And if you don't come to those meetings, people don't necessarily see you or feel that you are an insider who matters. This is a very important social function that meetings have.
Yeah.
And of course, this social function is not the only thing that matters, and we have to give enough time for other lots of other things that have to happen that can't happen in meetings or tend not to happen in meetings. But I'm to me, when people say, "Oh, meetings, oh, they're just so terrible," I just think, are you also the kind of person who complains about Mondays, that you really hate Mondays? Because, again, I've been alive and working for a lot of weeks, and I haven't really noticed Mondays to be a problem. Eh, maybe because I don't drink on the weekends. I mean,
Yeah.
that's it.
Right.
But it's just like, it's just something people say that they're saying because other people have said it, or maybe they're worried that Mondays will be bad, so they're gonna lower their expectations so that their expectations won't be shattered otherwise by having too high an expectation for Monday.
Right.
But meetings are terrible. Oh, and what are the other truisms other than meetings are terrible?
Oh, if it doesn't have an agenda, then it's a waste of time, or
Oh,
there's
there's an easy solution for a meeting
yeah,
that doesn't have an agenda.
yeah.
Um, here's my solution. I ask, "What's the agenda?" And the number of times that people have looked each other blankly and said, do you know the agenda? I don't know. I don't know what we're doing here. Zero. It's never happened. People always will say, "Who's the owner of the meeting?" I'm the guy who called the meeting. Okay, what are we here to do? We're here to do this. We're here to catch up on this or make sure everyone knows what they're supposed to do, or whatever it is. There's always an agenda that is like that. Just comes right up as soon as you ask for it. There for the asking. You can have
Mhm.
your agenda. Some people say you should publish the agenda beforehand, and that's okay, I guess. But I assume that my esteemed colleagues, whoever called the meeting, he knows why the
Yeah.
meeting is there, and if I'm invited, I assume it's because they think it's important for me to be there, and I'm almost never wrong. So I'm wondering, where are these companies where crazy wild people are ditzily calling meetings that
Yeah.
nobody wants? Because apparently those are the people who are posting online all the time about how much they hate meetings.
Well, even if it's a standing meeting, like a stand-up, right? Like it's a standing meeting, meaning every day, every week at the same time, or 3 times a week. Even if it's a standing meeting, you can go, as the meeting owner, you can go, I think I'm good. I don't have anything on that I'm unresolved about. Does anybody else have anything? And everybody goes, no, we're good, we're good, good. I'll give you some time back. But daily stand-ups usually have something interesting. Now there is artificial ceremony and ceremony for ceremony's sake, and none of us like those. But even in ceremony, there's a way to learn about things that you took for granted or that you were surprised about. Or that's the point of having a cadence is, okay, last week we were here, this week where are we? Because I have some assumptions. So when I host a meeting, I actually do like to have an agenda because I want to let people know here's what's on my mind. I
You mean
think we
a
need to talk
formal
about.
agenda, a published agenda?
Yeah, like agenda with like 3 to 5 bullet points and say, okay, here's what's on my mind.
That's fine. That's a professional thing to do.
Yeah, yeah, I
I
want
think
people
that's
to.
optional personally, but
Yeah, yeah. It's
okay.
I do it maybe 80%, 75 or 80% of the time. Like 3 out of 4 meetings, I'll have an agenda. But I want to feel like it's pretty selfish. Here's what I want out of this meeting, or here's what I think in my professional judgment we need to talk about in this next hour or half hour. And if we go over, then I'll take notes and I'll call another meeting, or they take offline or put in a parking lot or whatever we need to do. But it's not a big deal. And I go to a lot of meetings with no agenda. I can intuit what the meeting is probably about, and I can be
Keep
ready.
saying no agenda. You mean no published agenda?
No published agenda, yes. No written
If you ask the
expectation.
agenda, if you say what are we here to do, they'll tell
Yeah,
you.
yeah. I mean, no written advanced, like advanced thing I can look in my Outlook calendar and go, oh, they want to talk about blah 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 blah, right? Or like meetings, good meetings without an agenda might be everybody knows that it's it's daily stand-up. So we're going to talk about, what we did and what we're blocked and what we're going to do tomorrow and what
Yeah,
we need
okay.
from everybody else.
As I sit here, I think there might be another thing going on that I don't experience a lot, so I don't think about it. But in a lot of companies, especially bigger companies, there's politics.
Mhm.
There's there's politics everywhere, but there's significant unspoken politics. And the reason why there's significant unspoken politics is that there are lots of powerful people in the company and they have to get along, but they often don't really get along. And so they play these little chess games of power with each other. And then the people who work for them are necessarily part of the game.
Yep.
And so you may end up kind of stuck in a meeting because your boss wants you to go to it because you're there to spy on a
Yeah.
project or like find out, but you don't
Define
really want to
politics.
be.
My definition of politics is how people behave in a relationship. So when you get people in a meeting and you have different relationships with everybody, how do you behave? That could be kind of
So
political.
maybe I'll amend what I said. When I say politics, I mean power politics.
Okay. So
I mean the politics generated from people jockeying for power and
mm,
trying to get power, as
mm,
opposed to the kind of the gentler politics of having to accommodate different people of different personalities and different needs, because that's
okay.
a kind of politics too, but it can be a loving politics as
Yeah.
opposed to a cutthroat kind of politics when you start dealing with power. And some of the issues with power are people who are sent to meetings to spy or to report
Yeah.
back or to to be an agent provocateur of some kind, which that kind of thing does happen in big companies. I
Yeah.
don't I personally don't see it a lot, but on the last project with a big company that I was on, which was during the immediately before and during the pandemic, um, I did I did see some of that. So certain meetings were strained where I sensed that people were not saying what they really thought.
Well, since you're a consultant, isn't there a bit of a, I don't know, the Hawthorne effect of you joining a meeting? Does that instantly convey, oh, everybody knows you're a consultant and you're
Well,
on
in
contract?
this case, I wasn't a consultant. I was a member
Okay.
of the team. It was
Okay.
a project I was on during the pandemic. I was a part-time guy, so I wasn't full-time on it, but I was a member of the team. I was a
Okay.
designer working on
Okay.
a tool, and some of the meetings that I was in, I felt like certain people weren't saying what they meant because certain other powerful people in the meeting would have jumped on them
Oh, yeah, sure.
and they didn't want to be jumped on. They
Mhm.
didn't want to say anything that would incriminate themselves in the mind of someone else who had power. And I'm very loudmouthed. I like to let sunlight be the disinfectant. I want to bring
Right.
things out into the open. What happens in a situation where I want to speak openly about things uh in general, not about specific secrets or confidences I might have with someone else in the room. I'm not talking about that, but I'm
Yeah.
talking about I want us to have us discuss an important issue that everybody, I believe, is
Mm.
feeling bad about, but no one curiously has brought it up in this opportunity during
Yeah.
this meeting. Like, I wonder why no one's brought it up. Is it not on anybody's mind? I think
Yeah.
it is on people's minds,
A lot of people,
and I'm
right.
going to bring it up.
You're gonna bring it
But
up?
then I speak openly about it And that creates some discomfort because then people have to decide if they're going to contribute truthful facts and feelings, or are they going to shrug and pretend it's not an issue? Or, they have to decide. It's like I've called them in poker and they've got to decide if they're going to fold or they're
Yeah,
going to
that's
raise
really good.
or
That's
they're
a
going to
good
show
point.
their cards.
You got to
And
try. Yeah,
and I've
literally
I've
said,
called
show
the
their
question.
cards.
Everyone's going around saying check, check, check. And then
Yeah.
I say, wait a minute, I'm raising. And
Yeah.
they're like, I thought I was going to get
Yeah.
through this hand
Are you in or
without
out?
having to
Right.
pay anything.
That's
Now
right. You
I
want to
now
do
I
that.
gotta pay
Gotta
something.
pay. Well,
So
one of the paradigms that you and I have talked about before in a podcast like this is how let's pivot to how could that statement be true that meetings are useless and if there's no agenda, it's a waste of time. Have you been to a bad meeting yourself where you're like, this is so stupid? So what do you
yes.
think is behind that? Yeah.
Well, one thing that's behind it, here's a bind that will get me into that situation. I am trying to support a junior leader who hasn't quite figured out how to own the room and run a meeting. But if I just say, well, I'm out of here, I'm not going to waste my time, then I'll crush their confidence.
Yeah.
So you have to just sit and suffer. And an example of that, and this is not in a professional setting, but this is in a parental setting. Many years ago, when my son first got online, he was playing World of Warcraft as one of the first games he ever played online. And he was 12 years old, but he didn't want anyone to know he was 12. So he acted like he was older, and it got him to practice his typing, and he would write grammatically correct sentences because they make you look older online. And he would have me travel with him and play with him. And eventually he started a guild, and he got people to join the guild. Then he tried to have his first guild meeting. So we're online and we go to this inn.
Are you on a headset? Like you can talk to each other?
No, it was all typing at
Oh, it's
that
all
time.
typing. Okay, got it.
Yeah, because we didn't have fast enough internet to have voice. So it was all typing. And so we go to this inn, and all these characters, like 5 or 6 or 7 characters, are around the table. And Oliver has his character sit down at a bench, which is a keystroke combination that you have to sit. And he tries to run the meeting, but he doesn't have an agenda. He doesn't tell anyone what we're going to do in the meeting. And then people start running around the room with their characters and dancing on the table. And he was getting really upset with
Sure.
everybody. It's like, I'm trying to have the meeting and you guys are just messing around. And his emotions were rising. And I felt like, I didn't want to undermine him. I was trying to support him in his experience of his first meeting. But later I went and because the meeting broke up and he was pretty upset about it, that he couldn't get people to pay attention. So I said, look, the problem is you didn't have an agenda. You weren't sure what your motivation was. And look, I wouldn't have stayed there either if I wasn't your dad, and I'm going to stand by you no matter what. So he basically used me in World of Warcraft as a sidekick that could never leave him until he started making other friends, and then I became expendable. And but for a while, I was his only minion in
Yes.
World of Warcraft. I was like a minion that could not say no to him and had to sit through his meetings. So,
Got it.
I mean, that's one that comes to mind. But I've definitely been in other meetings where, like, I'm a manager of someone and they're trying to practice some leadership, and I don't want to undermine them in the meeting. So I'm going to
Yeah.
sit there. I'm gonna swallow my tongue because I don't want anything I say to be interpreted by them as trying to take over their meeting, but then I have to talk to them afterwards and say what went wrong here. So I've been in some meetings like that.
Mm.
And you can't, it's like you can't just, it's your son's school play. You can't just get up and say, this is the worst drama I've ever been and walk out as a parent at your child's school play. You have to sit there and you got to clap. It doesn't matter how bored you are.
Yeah. I found the performance banal and uninspiring, son.
Yeah, you don't, so there's that. So sometimes, short of that, there's another kind of thing that happens where you have a bad leader, but you're trying to support the leader. That person doesn't work for you. You work for them maybe, but you're trying to support them because when they're in a bad mood, everything's bad for you too. And so you have to sit through their nonsense and smile. I mean, maybe that's what people are complaining about, just being a victim of a bad leader, of a Kim Jong-il. I'm sure it's, people sitting
Yeah. I
through
think it's as simple
meetings
as,
with Elon Musk,
yeah,
smiling,
they just
nodding as he goes on
right.
and on about whatever nonsense he's into these days. Crazy guy.
But just not getting what they want out of the meeting, and it being excruciating either because they have nothing to add or nothing, they're not getting
And
any
they've got
useful
work to do.
information.
And they've got work to do.
Yeah, and they got work to, yeah.
And so this meeting is just taking more and more time away, and you can't escape. Sometimes we see this a lot online on LinkedIn. You remember, these posts where people say, you got to take care of yourself and you got to learn to say
Yeah.
no.
Right.
And, don't let anybody abuse you. And that's fine as far as it goes. But every time I see those, I think, well, why do people allow themselves to be abused? There could be some very good reasons for
Oh
that.
yeah. Yeah,
It
sure.
could be that they're well paid. It could be that no matter how much you feel that your 6-month-old screaming child is abusing you with its crying, you still are not going to abandon your 6-month-old screaming child. You're not going to do it. Even though you feel that, you're not getting the me time that you require. So you see a lot of these, it's like simplistic, just tell those other people to stuff it and
Yeah.
do your own thing no matter what. It all leaves out the tragedy of living in a world where you're not a billionaire, where people need you and you care about them, or where you're obliged to care about them because you need that health insurance and you can't quit. Sancho Panza, he might have really wanted to leave
Don Quixote.
Don Quixote
Yeah.
and so many times, but
Yeah.
maybe he needed the food money for his donkey. Can't have a starving donkey.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think we beat this subject to death.
All right.